My name is Ava Whitmore, and 3 months ago, at my father's retirement gala, he introduced everyone he loved in the order they mattered. His wife, his stepson, his board, his golf friends, his future. Then he pointed toward the table near the kitchen doors, smiled into a microphone, and said, "And of course, that's my daughter Ava. No degree, no discipline, no real career, but somehow she still finds her way to the open bar." 240 people laughed. Not all of them cruelly. That was the part that made it worse. Some laughed because they thought he was joking. Some laughed because they thought family humiliation was charming when served with champagne. Some laughed because rich men in tuxedos teach rooms what to find funny. I did not laugh. I did not cry. I did not look at my stepmother, who was smiling too hard, or at my stepbrother Blake, who was already standing near the stage like a crown prince waiting for coronation. I picked up my glass. I stood slowly, and I said, loud enough for the ballroom microphone to catch it, "Congratulations, Dad. This is the last time you will ever use me as proof that you were generous." The room went silent so fast I could hear a waiter stop pouring wine. My father's smile froze. I set the untouched champagne on the table, picked up my black clutch, and walked out of the Riverside Club with every eye in that room on my back. What my father did not know was that for the last 4 years, the construction consulting firm he called the backbone of Whitmore Development was mine. The cost controls that saved his company from collapse? Mine. The subcontractor audits that protected his biggest downtown project? Mine. The anonymous compliance reports his board praised? Mine. And the contract renewal sitting on his CFO's desk that week? Also mine. He had spent years telling people I had no future while quietly depending on the company I built from the future he stole. The next morning, I sent 2 letters. One was a standard 30-day termination notice. The other began with 6 words I had waited 12 years to write. "Dad, you were wrong about me." To understand why I walked out without shaking, you need to understand that I had been practicing disappearance since I was 10 years old. The Whitmores of Greenwich, Connecticut, looked like a family designed for holiday cards. A white colonial house with black shutters, a stone driveway, hydrangeas my stepmother replaced every May, a father whose name appeared in business magazines under phrases like regional growth and visionary development. My father, Grant Whitmore, owned Whitmore Development Group, a mid-sized construction and real estate firm that built apartment complexes, boutique hotels, medical offices, and enough luxury townhomes to convince wealthy people they were pioneers for moving into neighborhoods they had never noticed before. My mother, Elaine, was an architect. That is the first thing I tell people when they ask why I loved buildings. Not because my father built them. Because my mother understood them. She used to take me to job sites in a yellow hard hat that slid over my ears. She would point at beams, windows, stairwells, drainage lines, and say, "Ava, a building is a promise you make to people who will trust it with their bodies." She died when I was 9. A brain aneurysm. No warning. One Tuesday morning, she was making oatmeal and humming to the radio. By Thursday, adults were whispering in hallways, and my father was standing at the end of my bed, telling me my mother was gone with the same tone he used when a delivery had been delayed. A year later, he married Celeste. Celeste arrived with silk blouses, pearl earrings, a decorator's eye, and a 16-year-old son named Blake from her first marriage. Within 6 months, our house became theirs. Not legally, not dramatically. Atmospherically, my mother's drafting table disappeared from the sunroom because Celeste said it made the space feel unfinished. Her architecture books moved into boxes in the basement. Her framed sketches came off the hallway wall and were replaced with black and white photographs of sailboats nobody in our family owned. Blake got the guest suite over the garage because he needed privacy. I kept my room at the end of the hall with the window that stuck in August. My father never said he loved Blake more. He did not need to. He said it with attention. Blake got tutors when he failed calculus. I got told I was naturally independent. Blake got a new BMW for graduation. I got my mother's old Subaru and a lecture about responsibility. Blake got introduced at parties as my son, future CEO material. I got my daughter, Ava. She's artistic like her mother, which in my father's mouth meant impractical. I learned not to complain because complaining gave Celeste proof that I was difficult. She never shouted. That would have been too easy to name. She used softness as a blade. Sweetheart, your father is under enormous stress. Sweetheart, not every family decision can revolve around your feelings. Sweetheart, Blake has been through so much too. I remember once, when I was 13, finding my mother's sketchbook in a basement box. It was wrapped in a sweater that still smelled faintly like cedar and her perfume. I sat on the basement floor for an hour, tracing her pencil lines with my finger. Celeste found me. She did not yell. She tilted her head and said, "Ava, this obsession with your mother is not healthy. We have to let the dead rest." Then she took the sketchbook. I found it later in the trash outside. That was the day I learned grief could be treated like clutter by people who did not want it in the room. But my grandmother saw everything. My mother's mother, Ruth Mallory, lived in a brick row house in New Haven and wore red lipstick to the grocery store. She had been an accountant for 40 years, widowed early, suspicious of charm, and immune to Grant Whitmore's voice. Every Sunday, she called me. Not the family phone. My phone. When I was younger, she called at 7 exactly. "Report," she would say. So I would report. Grades, books, buildings I liked, what Blake had done, what Celeste had said, what Dad had forgotten. Grandma Ruth never told me to be patient. She never told me to understand. She never said he was doing his best, which is something adults say when they want children to make peace with not being protected. She said, "Keep records." I was 12. What kind? All kinds. Dates, promises, money, who said what. People who rewrite history hate paper. That sounded dramatic then. It would become a map. When I was 15, she took me to Yale's architecture library and let me sit at a large wooden table with books bigger than my torso. She watched me turn pages of floor plans, elevations, and city maps for 3 hours. "You have your mother's eye," she said. I looked up. "My dad says I'm not practical." "Your father thinks practical means profitable to him." I did not know what to say. She tapped my notebook. "Do not let a man with no imagination define your intelligence." That sentence stayed, not loudly, like a pilot light. By the time I was 18, I had one goal: architecture school. I got into Northeastern's architecture program with partial aid and a work-study placement. My father agreed to cover the rest. He did not celebrate, but he signed the forms. At the kitchen island, while Celeste arranged tulips in a vase and Blake scrolled his phone, Dad said, "Your mother would have liked this." It was the closest thing to blessing he had given me in years. I carried it like a fragile cup. For 2 years, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. Studio nights. Models cut until my fingers blistered. Structural systems. Environmental design. Urban history. I loved all of it. Not because it was easy, because it was the first place where my way of seeing made sense. Buildings were not just walls. They were movement, money, safety, weather, memory, power. A badly placed entrance could make an elderly tenant feel foolish. Cheap materials could become a leak, then mold, then a sick child. A beautiful courtyard with no shade was just a photograph of generosity, not actual care. I wanted to design spaces that did not lie. Sophomore year, I won a small departmental award for a mixed-income housing concept with shared childcare, flood-resilient ground floors, and on-site trade training. My professor wrote, "Ava understands dignity as infrastructure." I sent the note to my father. He replied 3 days later, "Nice." Blake got into the Columbia Business School Executive MBA program that same month. He had graduated college with a communications degree, worked briefly for a luxury car dealership, then joined Whitmore Development as Director of Brand Partnerships because Celeste said he had people instincts. People instincts, in practice, meant he could walk into a room knowing nothing and leave with someone else's confidence in his pocket. Dad called me home on a Thursday. Family meeting. Those 2 words still make my stomach tighten. I drove from Boston to Greenwich in my mother's old Subaru, parked behind Blake's BMW, and found them in my father's study. Grant behind the desk, Celeste beside him, Blake leaning against the bookshelf, pretending not to enjoy himself. There was a folder on the desk. My name was on it. I sat down. Dad did not. "Ava," he said, "we need to make a strategic family decision." I looked at the folder. "About what?" "Blake has a major opportunity. Columbia, executive track. This could position him to take over the company properly when I step back." Blake gave a modest little shrug, as if destiny had asked for nothing more than tuition. Dad continued, "Given current market conditions and several projects tying up liquidity, we cannot support both his program and your tuition this year." My body went cold before my mind accepted the sentence. "What do you mean, support both?" Celeste spoke then, voice soft as expensive bedding. It is not forever. Sweetheart, you can take a pause. Architecture will still be there." "My program does not work like that." "You are very talented," she said. "You can always find another path." Dad opened the folder. "I spoke to your school's financial office. You can withdraw before the payment deadline without academic penalty." "You called my school?" "I am your father." "You promised—" His face hardened. "Do not become dramatic." "You promised, Mom." The room changed. Celeste inhaled sharply. Blake looked at the floor. My father's jaw set. Do not use your mother to manipulate me. I almost could not breathe. She wanted me to study architecture. She wanted you safe, he snapped. And right now, this family needs to invest where the return is highest. Return. There it was. At 20 years old, I learned I was not a daughter in that room. I was an underperforming asset. Blake said, Ava, come on. I'll be running the company. If I do well, we all do well. I looked at him. Will you pay my tuition next year? He smiled like I had made a joke. Dad slid a withdrawal form across the desk. Sign it. I did not sign. Not then. But he had already stopped payment. By Monday, the university confirmed my balance was unpaid. My housing deposit failed. My scholarship conditions could not cover the gap. I could have fought harder. Maybe someone watching this thinks I should have. But I was 20. My mother was dead. My father had closed the door. And I had $1,840 in my checking account. I packed my studio supplies into 3 boxes, left my half-built model behind because it did not fit in the car, and drove to Grandma Ruth's house in New Haven. She opened the door, saw my face, and said one sentence. He finally did it. Then she hugged me so hard my ribs hurt. I lived with Grandma Ruth for 11 months. That year saved me. Not because it was easy. Because she refused to let me disappear inside what had happened. She charged me rent. $200 a month. I thought it was cruel at first until I discovered she had put every payment into a savings envelope with my name on it. You need to feel yourself paying for your own life, she said. And then you need to see that the money did not vanish into someone else's mouth. I got a job as a receptionist for a small construction management firm in New Haven called Ferris and Dole. The office smelled like printer toner, coffee, wet boots, and men who said sweetheart to women, holding more information than they did. My title was administrative assistant. In reality, I handled bid packets, subcontractor invoices, change order logs, permit applications, lien waivers, scheduling conflicts, insurance certificates, and panic. Construction, I discovered, was less about building and more about preventing avoidable disasters from being expensive enough to kill a project. I was good at it. Annoyingly good. I knew drawings from architecture school. I knew budgets from Grandma Ruth. I knew how powerful men disguised mistakes as market forces because I had grown up watching my father do it at dinner. My first month, I caught a duplicate billing error from a concrete subcontractor. Small, $12,400. My supervisor, Marla Dole, looked at the highlighted invoice, then at me. Where did you learn to read change orders like this? Architecture school. I thought you said you left. I did. She picked up the invoice. School left you something? Marla was not warm. She was better than warm. She was fair. She had started as a project coordinator in a company where every man assumed she was taking notes for someone else. By 54, she owned half the firm and could make a superintendent apologize with one look. She taught me everything my father never thought women needed to know. How to read a subcontract, how to spot padded allowances, how to tell a real delay from a staged one, how to negotiate without raising your voice, How to document a conversation so thoroughly that a liar feels tired before he begins. At night, I took free online courses: construction law, cost estimating, supply chain management, risk modeling. Excel so advanced it became less spreadsheet and more weapon. I slept 5 hours if I was lucky. I ate lentils, eggs, and whatever Grandma Ruth insisted was perfectly good soup, even when its original identity was unclear. Once, around midnight, she found me at the kitchen table surrounded by permit maps and cost schedules. "You look like your mother," she said. I froze. She rarely said that. Did she ever feel like she was starting too late? Grandma Ruth sat down across from me. "Your mother started over twice before she met your father. People only call women late when they are afraid the women will arrive without permission." I wrote that down. 2 years later, I started my company, Mallory Risk Development Advisory. Mallory was my mother's maiden name. The company began as me, a laptop, a borrowed desk in Marla's spare office, and 3 clients who thought they were hiring a quiet young woman to organize messy project files. Instead, I saved one client $180,000 by catching a procurement clause that would have locked them into inflated steel pricing. Another client avoided a lawsuit because I found a permit violation before the city inspector did. A third brought me in after their hotel renovation ran 6 months late. I rebuilt the schedule, renegotiated 3 vendor agreements, and gave their board a report so clear the CFO called me terrifying in a helpful way. I stayed invisible by design. No personal website photo. No public founder bio. Client communications went through a business alias and later through my operations director. Why? Because the development world was smaller than people think. And because Whitmore Development was everywhere in Connecticut. If my father discovered me too early, he would either take credit or try to crush the company before it could stand. So I let Mallory speak before Ava did. By 28, I had 6 employees. By 21. By 32, we had an office in Boston, a smaller office in New Haven, and annual revenue just under $6 million. We specialized in construction risk, cost recovery, vendor audit, owner representation, and development compliance. Not glamorous. Powerful. And one of our biggest clients was Whitmore Development Group. They signed with us after their downtown Hartford mixed-use project went sideways. A subcontractor dispute, cost overruns, permit confusion, and a lender threatening to pause funding. Blake was senior vice president by then and had apparently described the crisis as a branding obstacle. The board preferred math. They hired us through a law firm. I kept my name off the account. Our reports went through my managing partner, Kieran Holt. Meetings were virtual, cameras off when necessary, documents branded Mallory Advisory. For 4 years, my company quietly stabilized my father's. We recovered millions in inflated billing, reduced vendor disputes, rebuilt procurement systems, flagged structural risks before they became headlines, saved the Hartford project, then the Stamford Medical Office, then the Providence Boutique Hotel. My father praised Mallory Advisory at industry panels. Blake called our reports the only reason operations doesn't make me drink. Once, at a fundraiser, I stood 10 feet away while my father told a bank executive, Whoever runs Mallory is the sharpest development brain I've seen in 20 years. I turned away before I smiled. Not because it felt good, because it felt dangerous. There is a strange grief in being praised by someone who would withdraw the praise if he knew it belonged to you. Grandma Ruth died 2 years before the gala. A stroke, fast, not painless for Dutchen, according to the doctors, but fast enough that I did not get a final Sunday call. At the funeral, my father cried publicly. He used a handkerchief. He spoke about family legacy and Ruth's fierce devotion. He did not mention that she had stopped speaking to him 5 years earlier after he told her I had chosen to wander instead of grow up. I sat in the 4th row. Not the family row. The usher tried to move me forward. Celeste said gently, "Ava prefers space." I let her have the sentence. After the burial, a lawyer named Helena Price approached me outside the church. "Ava Whitmore?" "Yes. I represented your grandmother's private estate. She left instructions for me to contact you directly." My father noticed us speaking. His eyes narrowed. I felt 12 years old for half a second. Then Helena handed me a card. "Call me tomorrow." I did. Grandma Ruth had left me a trust worth $920,000. Not as much as some families lose on a bad investment. More than enough to change the temperature of my life. But the money was not the part that broke me. The letter was... Helena read it aloud because my hands were shaking too badly. My fierce girl. If Helena is reading this, I have gone where your mother can finally tell me I was too stubborn, and I can finally tell her she was right. I know what Grant did. Not just the tuition. All of it. I know about the education fund Elaine created. I know he spent it on Blake and called it strategy. I know he looked at your mother's daughter and saw a cost instead of a promise. I could not make him decent, so I made you protected. This money is yours. No strings, no family permissions, no grant. Use it to build, rest, fight, leave, or do whatever gives you back to yourself. One more thing. Do not waste your life proving your worth to people who benefit from denying it. When they finally need what you built, make sure they meet the builder. I love you more than you were loved out loud. Grandma Ruth. I sat on my kitchen floor after the call and cried until morning. Not because of the money, because she knew. Because someone had been keeping the record when I thought I was remembering alone. I put part of the trust into Mallory Advisory. I put part into a safety reserve. And I put the letter in a black folder labeled Proof of Love. That folder stayed in the top drawer of my desk. The gala invitation arrived 18 months later. Grant Whitmore Retirement Celebration. Riverside Country Club. Black tie. I almost ignored it. But the renewal contract with Whitmore Development was due the same week. 5 more years, significant fee increase, expanded advisory authority. Kieran wanted to accept. They're profitable, dependent, and frankly easier to manage than most clients because they follow our recommendations like scripture. I looked at the draft renewal. Do they know who owns us yet? No. Has anyone asked? Blake's assistant asked once if Mallory was named after a founder. I said yes. I laughed. Not happily. Grandma Ruth's words came back. Make sure they meet the builder. I RSVP'd yes to the gala. Not because I wanted reconciliation. Not because I wanted revenge. Because something in me knew my father would give me one final answer in public. And I was tired of building my life around questions. The night of the gala, I wore a dark green dress my mother would have loved. Not because it was expensive, though it was. Because the neckline was architectural, the seams precise, the fabric strong enough to hold its shape without asking permission. I wore Grandma Ruth's gold watch. I drove myself in a black Mercedes I bought used and kept immaculate. Riverside Country Club looked exactly like I remembered. Chandeliers, polished floors, floral arrangements, tall enough to block conversations people did not want to have anyway. Celeste saw me at the entrance. Her smile tightened. "Ava, you came." "You invited me." "Of course." Her eyes scanned the dress, the watch, the bag. Inventory, not admiration. "You look, well, so do you." That was generous. She leaned in and kissed the air beside my cheek. "Your father is in a sentimental mood tonight. Please do not make anything difficult." I almost laughed. Difficult. The word families use when they mean honest. Blake found me near the champagne table. He looked expensive and slightly restless, the way men look when they are waiting for power already promised, but not yet delivered. "Ava," he said. "Wow, long time." "Blake." He looked me up and down. "Boston agrees with you. Work agrees with me." He smiled. "Still doing office stuff for construction companies?" "Something like that." "Good for you." He said it with the warm emptiness people use when they want to end a conversation without seeming rude. "Dad is making the official transition announcement tonight. Big moment. For you. For the family." I looked at him. "Those are not always the same thing." His smile thinned. "You know, Ava, you could have been part of this if you had not run off." There it was. The old story. I had run off. No one had pushed me. No one had emptied the road. I had simply failed to stay grateful beside the locked door. "I did not run," I said. "I was redirected." He blinked, not understanding. That was Blake's gift. He never recognized a room until it had already been furnished for him. My seat was at table 22, near the kitchen entrance, with a retired subcontractor, 2 distant cousins, a banker's second wife, and a man who spent 15 minutes explaining cryptocurrency to the centerpiece. I had expected no better. From there, I could see everything. My father near the stage, shaking hands. Celeste beside him, glowing in silver. Blake accepting congratulations for a job he had not officially been given yet. The board chair laughing too loudly. The CFO, Martin Hale, looking worried. That interested me. Martin was one of the few Whitmore executives who actually read Mallory's reports. He knew enough to fear a weak foundation. At 8:45, the lights dimmed. My father took the stage. The room applauded before he spoke. That was power, people rewarding you for arriving where you told them to look. Grant Whitmore stood under the warm stage lights, silver-haired, tall, still handsome in the way men are called distinguished, when women would be called tired. "Thank you," he began. "After 40 years in development, I can say this: buildings are easy compared to families." Laughter. I set down my fork. He thanked investors. Partners. The board. Celeste. My wife, Celeste, who taught me grace during the hardest seasons. Celeste dabbed her eyes. He thanked Blake. My son in every way that matters. Blake, who will take over as CEO next quarter. He is the future of Whitmore Development. Standing applause. Blake rose, waved, accepted the room's belief as if he had poured the concrete himself. Then my father smiled in my direction. The air changed. And yes, my daughter Ava is here tonight. The spotlight swung. I felt it find me. She always had big dreams. This one, architecture school, changing the world, all that. He chuckled. No degree, no discipline, no real career. But somehow she still finds her way to the open bar. The room laughed. 240 people. Crystal, silk, tuxedos, teeth. Something inside me went very quiet. Not numb. Clear. My father kept smiling, waiting for me to play my role. The good sport, the family joke. The daughter who absorbs the insult so the father can remain charming. I stood. The laughter faded unevenly. I picked up my champagne glass. My father's hand tightened around the microphone. Congratulations, Dad, I said. The microphone near my table caught my voice. I heard it echo through the ballroom speakers, calm and bright. 40 years of development, quite a legacy. No one moved. You taught me a lot about leverage, about promises, about what people are willing to build on top of stolen ground. My father's smile vanished. I raised the glass slightly. This is the last time you will ever use me as proof that you were generous. I set the glass down. I hope retirement gives you time to understand what you lost. Then I picked up my clutch and walked out. I did not rush. I did not look back. My heels clicked against the floor. Behind me, the silence was not empty. It was full of people recalculating. Celeste caught me near the valet stand. Not my father. Not Blake. Celeste. Of course. Men like Grant send women to smooth the blood before anyone sees where the knife went. Ava, she hissed, grabbing my elbow. What was that? I looked at her hand until she let go. A goodbye. You humiliated your father. I laughed once. You cannot be serious. He made a joke. No, I said. He made a habit visible. Her face hardened. Do not be dramatic. You have always twisted things. The country club doors opened behind her. My father stepped out into the cool September night. Blake followed. Several guests hovered just inside the glass, pretending not to watch. Dad's voice was low. Go back inside and apologize. No. His eyes narrowed. You will not embarrass me in front of my partners. You did that yourself. Ava. There was the old warning in his voice, the one that used to make me fold. It did nothing now. I opened my car door. Yuck, if you leave, he said. Do not expect anything from this family again. I turned. Dad, the last thing I expected from this family was honesty. Even that was too much. Blake stepped forward. Stop acting like some victim. You had every chance. I looked at him. No, I had every chance you did not need. He frowned because he felt the insult without understanding the math. My father said, You are done?" I nodded. "Yes." Then I got in my car and drove away. 20 minutes later, I pulled into a highway rest stop, parked under a flickering light, and sat with both hands on the steering wheel. I expected to sob. I did not. Instead, I felt a door close behind me with a clean sound. No slam. No hecho. Just done. At midnight, I emailed Kieran. "Send the termination notice Monday at 9 a.m. Include no personal language. 30 days. Standard clause." He replied 2 minutes later. "Are you sure?" I typed back, "Yes." Then I opened the black folder on my passenger seat. Proof of love. Grandma Ruth's letter was inside. I read the last line under the harsh rest stop light. "When they finally need what you built, make sure they meet the builder." I whispered, "Monday." Monday morning, 9 Mallory Advisory delivered the official termination notice to Whitmore Development Group. A clean letter. Polite, professional, strategic repositioning of client portfolio. Per Section 12.4, services to conclude after the 30-day transition period. No drama, no accusations. Just the kind of business language powerful people use when they want consequences to arrive wearing a tie. At 9:17, Kieran forwarded me the first response. "Urgent call requested from Martin Hale, CFO." At 9:26, Blake called Kieran directly. At 9:41, my father's assistant called our legal line. At 10:03, Celeste texted me for the first time in 8 months. "Ava, please call your father. Whatever you think happened Saturday, this is not the way to handle family matters." Family matters. Not business. Not apology. Family matters. I did not reply. At 10:15, we sent the personal envelope. Career. Signature required. Addressed to Grant Whitmore. Inside was my letter. "Dad, you told a room of 240 people that I had no degree, no discipline, and no real career. Here is the truth. Mallory Risk and Development Advisory is mine. I built it after you chose Blake's business school over the education you promised my mother you would protect. For 4 years, my company has been protecting Whitmore Development from cost overruns, vendor disputes, compliance failures, and leadership decisions made by people who confuse confidence with competence. You praised my work when you did not know it was mine. That matters not because I need your praise, because it proves you were capable of seeing my value only when you could not attach my name to it. I am ending the contract as a boundary, not revenge. Grandma Ruth knew what you did. She left me a trust you could not touch. She also told me not to be cruel, so I will only be honest. The daughter you called a failure has been helping hold your company together. Now she is done. Do not contact me except through counsel. Ava Elaine Whitmore, founder and managing principal, Mallory Risk and Development Advisory. I included incorporation documents. The client report summary from the Hartford project. A copy of the termination notice. And a photocopy of Grandma Ruth's trust letter with one line highlighted. He looked at your mother's daughter and saw a cost instead of a promise. Patricia, his executive assistant, signed for the envelope at 10:42. At 11:03, my phone rang. Dad. I watched it vibrate until it stopped. Then Blake. then Celeste, then Dad again. By noon, I had 19 missed calls, 7 text messages, and 1 voicemail from Martin Hale asking for a professional transition meeting. I answered Martin. Not my family. He arrived at our Boston office the next morning with 2 board members and the expression of a man who had spent the night reading fire codes in a burning building. "Ava," he said when I entered the conference room. Not Miss Whitmore. Not Mallory. "Ava." He knew. "Martin." He stood. "I owe you an apology." "That is not necessary for business." "It is necessary for me." I let him speak. "I read your reports for 4 years. They were the most useful documents this company received. I should have asked who was behind them. I did not because the system worked for me." That was more honesty than my father had managed in 12 years. "Thank you," I said. He sat down. "Can we salvage the contract?" "No." "Even if Grant is removed from communication?" "No." "What about Blake?" I looked at him. "Especially Blake." The board members exchanged a glance. So the cracks were already there. I gave Martin a transition plan. 30 days of document handover. No additional strategy. No executive consulting. No emergency support after termination. He accepted because he had no choice and enough dignity not to pretend otherwise. At 4:30 that afternoon, my family arrived anyway. Grant. Celeste. Blake. No appointment. My receptionist called from the lobby. "There are 3 people here insisting they are your family." I almost said they were mistaken. Instead, I said, "Conference room C, glass walls." Witnesses. Not for spectacle. For safety. I entered 5 minutes later. My father stood by the window overlooking Boston Harbor. For the first time in my life, he looked out of place in a room connected to my success. Celeste sat with her handbag in her lap like a shield. Blake paced. The moment I walked in, he turned. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I looked at him. "Sit down or leave." He laughed. I did not. My father said, "Blake." Blake sat. I took the head of the table. Not because I needed symbolism, because it was my table. Dad held up my letter. "Is this real?" "Which part?" "All of it." "Yes." "You own Mallory Advisory?" "Yes." "You have been working with Whitmore for 4 years." "My company has." He stared at me as if the facts were personally insulting. "How?" That one almost made me smile. "How did I build a company, or how did you fail to notice?" Celeste inhaled. "Ava, this attitude is not helpful." "No, but it is earned." Dad placed both hands on the table. "We need to discuss the contract." "No, you need to discuss the contract. I have terminated it." "You cannot do this." "I can. Section 12.4. Blake leaned forward. "You realize what happens if Mallory walks?" "Yes." Projects stall. Lenders panic. Vendors start circling. We lose millions. Then you should have built internal competence instead of outsourcing judgment. His face reddened. "You vindictive—" "Careful," I said. The room went quiet. Not because I shouted, because I did not. I turned to my father. "I was going to renew—" His expression shifted. "What?" "Before the gala, I was going to Renew, 5 years, expanded scope, higher fees, but professionally, it made sense. Celeste whispered, "Then why?" I looked at her because he stood in front of a ballroom and reminded me that nothing I build is safe around people committed to calling me worthless. Dad lowered his eyes for half a second. Then pride came back, wounded and angry. I made a bad joke. "No," I said. "You made a public record." He flinched. I slid a folder across the table. "This contains the transition schedule. All communications go through Kieran or counsel. If any of you contact my staff directly, the remaining transition period ends immediately." Blake stood. "You think you are so powerful now?" "No," I said. "I think I am unavailable." That stopped him. It stopped me too, a little, because it was the truest sentence I had ever spoken to my family. I was unavailable. For rescue, for ridicule, for unpaid loyalty, for being made small so they could feel tall. My father opened the folder but did not read it. "You are still my daughter." I looked at him for a long time. "I have always been your daughter. That was never the part in question." Celeste began to cry then. Small, delicate tears. The kind that used to rearrange rooms. I watched them fall and felt nothing move inside me. She said, "We were trying to do what was best." For Blake. For the family. You keep using that word for the people you chose. She looked away. My father whispered, "What do you want?" That questioned. 12 years late. I thought of 20-year-old me at his desk. My mother's fund. Grandma Ruth's Sunday calls. The architecture model I left behind. The company I built. The ballroom laughter. "Nothing," I said. His face hardened. "There must be something." "No, that is what you cannot understand. I did not come for money, or approval, or a seat at your table. I built my own." I stood. "This meeting is over," Blake muttered. "You'll regret this." I looked at him. "Blake, regret is what happens when people finally understand the cost of what they already did." He had no answer. They left through the glass lobby, past employees who pretended not to watch and watched anyway. My assistant placed tea on my desk afterward. "I did not know whether you needed coffee or a weapon," she said. "Tea is fine." I closed my office door. Then I sat on the floor and shook for 10 minutes. Being strong in public does not mean your body forgets what it survived. The first public sign of trouble at Whitmore Development came 6 weeks later. A lender paused funding on the Providence Hotel conversion pending an independent cost review. Then a subcontractor filed a lien on the Stamford Medical Office project. Then 2 senior project managers resigned. Then the trade press reported that Whitmore Development was undergoing operational restructuring after a key advisory partner ended services. They did not name Mallory at first. Then someone leaked it. Not me. I never needed to leak anything. Truth has its own weather system. The article was short but lethal. Whitmore Development loses risk advisory partner amid CEO transition. Buried in paragraph 6 was the sentence that changed everything. Mallory Risk and Development Advisory is led by founder Ava Whitmore, daughter of outgoing CEO Grant Whitmore. By noon, my inbox was a museum of delayed curiosity. Former classmates, reporters, industry contacts, 2 cousins who suddenly always knew I was brilliant. A woman from the Gala wrote, "I am sorry I laughed. I thought it was a family joke. I should have known better." I appreciated that one. Most apologies tried to avoid naming the harm. That one did not. 3 days after the article, Uncle Daniel called. Not my husband Daniel. This was my father's younger brother, Daniel Whitmore, who had left the family business decades earlier to teach art in Vermont. My father called him irresponsible. Grandma Ruth called him the only Whitmore man with a pulse. I had not spoken to him since my mother's funeral. "Ava," he said. "Uncle Daniel, I read the article. So did everyone." He sighed. "There is something you need to know, something I should have told you years ago." I sat down. People say that sentence like it is a key. It is usually a bomb. "What?" "Your mother created an education fund for you before she died." My hand went still around the phone. "I know Dad stopped paying tuition." "No," he said. "You do not understand. Elaine set aside enough to cover 4 years of architecture school, living expenses, even graduate study if you wanted it. It was separate from Grant's business accounts. She made him trustee because she was sick and scared and still believed he would honor her." The room blurred. What happened to it? Grant used it for Blake, tuition, rent, networking trips, and part of the deposit on Blake's first condo. I did not speak. Uncle Daniel's voice broke. "Ruth found out. She tried to force him to replace it. He threatened to cut her off from you if she kept pushing. She set up the trust because she could not get Elaine's money back." I pressed my palm to my chest because something there felt physically torn. All those years, I thought Dad had chosen not to pay for my future. That was bad enough. But he had not only chosen Blake, he had spent my mother's final promise on Celeste's son. "Do you have proof?" I asked. "Yes." "Send it!" "Ava!" "Send it." He did. Bank statements, trust documents, emails between my mother's estate attorney and my father, a letter from Grandma Ruth to Grant demanding he restore the funds. His reply? One line burned into me. "Ava's ambitions are not realistic enough to justify locking capital away." Locking capital away. My mother's love translated into an investment problem. I sent everything to Helena Price. Then I sat in my office long after sunset, reading the same sentence until it stopped being words and became weather. Kieran came in around 7. "You okay?" "No." He nodded. "Tea or weapon?" "Both." He returned with tea and sat across from me without speaking. That is how you know someone loves you properly. They do not always try to fix the wound while you are still identifying the blade. I did not sue immediately. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to understand what justice would cost me. Helena said the case was complicated but possible. Breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of restricted education funds, statute issues, but delayed discovery could matter. Documents were strong. Publicity would be ugly. "Ugly for him," she said. "Ugly for me, too." Yes. I spent 3 weeks thinking. In that time, Whitmore Development's board quietly postponed Blake's CEO transition, then suspended it, then announced an interim operating committee led by Martin Hale. My father called once. I did not answer. He left a voicemail. Ava, I need to talk to you about your mother. I deleted it, not because I did not want to hear about her, because he had proven he could use her name as a tool when he had nothing else left. If he wanted to speak truth, he could put it in writing. He did, eventually. A letter. 3 pages. The first page was about stress, the second about market conditions, the third about how young Blake had been and how complicated blended families were. The word sorry appeared once. Not for stealing the fund. 4. The pain surrounding the misunderstanding. I gave the letter to Helena. She raised one eyebrow. Men like this should be charged extra for adjectives. I loved her a little then. The legal demand went out the next week. Private. Formal. Restore the education fund value with growth. Acknowledge misuse of restricted assets and agree to no further contact except through counsel. My father refused. Then the board found out. That part was not my doing. Blake, in a panic, apparently told Martin that I was trying to extort the family over old education money. Martin asked for documents. Blake did not have them. The board asked Grant. Grant gave evasive answers. Then Uncle Daniel, tired of cowardice after 12 years, sent the board copies. That was the real collapse. Not Mallory. Not the contract. The board could survive operational loss. It could not ignore a founder who had misused a deceased wife's education fund for his stepson while presenting himself as a family values builder in every annual report. The official statement came in careful language. Grant Whitmore has resigned from all advisory and board capacities, effective immediately. Blake Whitmore has stepped back from executive transition planning. Martin Hale will serve as interim CEO. Again, no drama, no accusations, just consequences wearing a Navy suit. At home that night, I opened my mother's sketchbook, the one Celeste had thrown away years earlier. Grandma Ruth had rescued it from the trash without telling me and gave it to me when I turned 25. Inside, on the last page, my mother had drawn a small library with arched windows and reading nooks. In the margin, she had written, "For Ava someday, a place where quiet girls can think without being interrupted." I traced the words with my finger. Then I knew what I wanted. Not revenge. Not the Whitmore house. Not a public apology written by lawyers. I wanted to build the promise. So the settlement, when it came, became the Elaine Mallory Design Fund. A scholarship for women who had left architecture, planning, engineering, or construction programs because of family financial control, caregiving burdens, or domestic pressure. The first year, we funded 3 students. One was 21 and had been told engineering was too masculine. One was 38 with 2 children and a drafting portfolio she kept in a laundry basket. One was 19 and cried through the entire interview because she said nobody had ever asked what she wanted to build. I gave each of them a copy of the same sentence. Dignity is infrastructure. My mother's words through me. A year after the retirement gala, Mallory Advisory moved into a larger office overlooking the harbor. Not glassy for ego. Light for everyone. Every desk had a window within sight. Every conference room had acoustic panels because I had spent enough of my life in rooms where powerful voices bounced too loudly. The break room was larger than necessary. Kieran called it inefficient. I called it human. On the wall near reception, we hung a framed blueprint. Not one of my company's projects. My mother's library sketch. Beside it, a small brass plaque. Elaine Mallory Whitmore. A building is a promise. The first time Uncle Daniel visited, he stood in front of the plaque for a long time. She would have loved this, he said. I hope so. She would have loved you more. That got me. Grief has trap doors. You can walk over the same floor for years and still fall through. I still go to therapy. Every Thursday at 4. My therapist, Dr. Annika Paddle, once asked, "Do you miss them?" I answered too quickly, "Yet no." She waited. Good therapists are professionally annoying that way. Finally, I said, I miss who I kept hoping they might become. That was the honest answer. I do not miss the insults. I do not miss Celeste's soft knives, or Blake's inherited throne, or my father's affection offered only as credit against my obedience. But I miss the imaginary father who might have kept my mother's promise. I miss the kitchen where a different version of my life could have happened. I miss what should have been. That is the hardest grief to explain. People tell you, but they were awful. Yes, and still, somewhere inside, a child is waiting at the study door for her father to choose her. Healing is not killing that child. It is taking her hand and walking away together. My father sent one final message through Helena after the settlement. It was short. Tell Ava her mother would be proud. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back through counsel. She would be disappointed in you. Helena asked if I was sure. I said yes. Some truths should be delivered while people are still alive to receive them. Blake moved to Miami and started calling himself a development strategist online. Celeste sold the Greenwich house 18 months later. My father moved into a condo near the golf club. I hear things through Uncle Daniel sometimes, but less and less. Whitmore Development survived, smaller and better managed under Martin Hale. Mallory Advisory never returned as a client, Martin asked once. Respectfully, I said no. Respectfully. Not every bridge must be rebuilt because both sides survived the fire. I still work too much. I still sometimes hear my father's voice when a room goes quiet. No degree, no discipline, no real career. Then I look at the office around me, at the people I employ, at the scholarship recipients sending updates, at the buildings made safer because my company read the fine print. And I hear another voice. Grandma Ruth. People who rewrite history hate paper. So I keep paper. Contracts. Letters. Records. Sketches. Proof. Not because I live in the past. Because I refuse to let anyone steal the architecture of what happened. Here is what I learned from 12 years of invisibility, one stolen education fund, and a retirement gala where my father mistook cruelty for comedy. Sometimes the family that calls you a failure is relying on you more than they know. Sometimes being cut off is the first honest gift they ever give you. Sometimes the life they say you cannot build becomes the foundation under their feet. And when they finally realize it, you do not have to scream. You can simply remove your support and let gravity explain. I did not destroy my father's company. I stopped carrying it in secret. I did not ruin Blake's future. I stopped donating mine to it. I did not betray my family. I stopped letting them use my loyalty as a place to hide their theft. My name is Ava Whitmore. I am 32 years old. I do not have an architecture degree, but I built a company. I built a fund. I built a life with rooms large enough for the truth. And if my father taught me anything, it is this. A building built on stolen ground will always crack. But a woman who rebuilds herself in silence? By the time they hear her footsteps leaving, the structure is already hers.